So one night, this woman drives out to the middle of nowhere to meet up with her fiance, when suddenly someone comes up behind her and they put a pew-pew to the back of her head and they pull the trigger. So the woman's name is Molly, and Molly is very sweet. She's on the spectrum, she likes to vlog on YouTube.
Hi guys!
And Molly really wants to get married. So one day she gets a new job at a local prison as a corrections officer. And there she meets this guy, Jim. And Jim is also a corrections officer. And Molly thinks Jim is fine. So Molly and Jim become work friends, then things get romantic. Here's the thing though, Jim is technically already married to this woman, who we'll call Jane Doe. But Jim and Jane Doe are separated. They're in the process of getting a divorce. They're just waiting for the divorce to be finalized. No big deal, Molly and Jim officially start dating anyway. And things are going great. They're together all the time, going on vacations to Disney World and Mexico. She introduces Jim to her family. Her family doesn't really like Jim, but whatever, they're in love. And then, finally, after Molly's been dating Jim for 7 years, Jim's divorce gets finalized. And Molly sees this as her opportunity. I mean, she wants to be with Jim. She wants to get married. She wants to move in with him like they're not even living together. So she goes out and proposes to him. And he says yes, and boom, they start planning the wedding. And she's excited, like she's finally gonna get married. They get a wedding planner, they send out invitations. Then, a few weeks before the wedding, something terrible happens. Jim's ex-wife, Jane Doe, she gets into a horrible car accident. And it's bad. This accident is so bad, she gets put on life support. And Jim, he comes to Molly and he says, hey, we need to reduce the guest list at the wedding because most of his family is going to be in the hospital trying to support Jane Doe. And Molly, she's a good person, so she's like, yeah, that's fine. And then, shortly after, Jane Doe's in the hospital, she's still on life support, and Jim and his family decide to pull the plug. And sadly, Jane Doe passes away. So then Jim, he feels like he may have to call off the wedding because his family is really torn up about his ex passing away. Now, despite how bad Molly wants to get married, she totally understands. Now, remember how I said Molly's family doesn't like Jim? Well, Molly's brother, this guy, who thinks Jim is an absolute turd, he goes to Molly and he's like, are you sure Jane Doe is Jim's ex-wife? Because I can't find any record of Jim being divorced from her. Now Molly, she dismisses this, but it starts to put doubt in her head. Then fast forward to the week of their wedding, and Jim and Molly go to get their marriage license, and the county clerk asks them if Jim's ever been married before, how did his last marriage end, like standard stuff. And Jim starts acting weird. Like really evasive. And so this puts even more doubt in Molly's head. And so Molly, she goes home and she starts Googling around, searching for Jane Doe's obituary. And I assume at this point she's asking Jim all kinds of questions about his previous marriage, cause she's getting real suspicious. But then, 2 days before the wedding, Jim asks Molly to meet up with him one night. And the spot he wants to meet in is on a back road. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. But whatever, he's her fiance, so of course she goes and meets him there. So they're out there, and at some point, Jim gets Molly to look in the opposite direction, away from him. And this is when Jim quietly pulls out his pew-pew and he points it at the back of her head and he pulls the trigger. And unfortunately, Molly doesn't survive. And Jim immediately, he leaves the scene and he leaves Molly's body and he goes home. Later, a guy driving by, he sees Molly's car and her body, and he calls the police. So police show up, and they find Molly there, on the ground, her engagement ring is still on her hand, and her marriage certificate is still in the front seat of her car. Now, her marriage certificate has her name on it, so police can immediately identify who she is. You know who else's name is on that marriage certificate? Jim's. So police go to Jim's house, because they got to inform him that his fiancée passed away. They get there, and they knock, and Jim answers the door. But guess who else answers the door? Jane Doe. She's not dead. She's not in a coma. She was never in a coma. Never in a car accident or on life support. Jim made that all up. Not only that, she and Jim had never divorced. They had never separated. They had never even talked about getting a divorce. As far as she knows, she and Jim have been happily married for the last 23 years. That's how long they've been married. Jim has been living a double life. Married to Jane Doe, secretly dating Molly, while telling Molly that Jane Doe is dead. Then, allegedly, when Molly got too close to finding the truth, Jim lured her out to the middle of nowhere and he unalived her. So ultimately, Jim is arrested, here's his mugshot, he goes to trial, he's found guilty of first-degree murder, and he's sentenced to life. And pretty quickly, Jane Doe divorced him. Good for her. And all this happened in misery, so shout out to Misery.